Zero Foxtrot does not profess to share or promote the opinions and beliefs expressed by show host or guests. The Stay Zero podcast was created to provide a platform for servicemen and women to share their stories. Due to the nature of this podcast, sensitive topics will arise. Conversations about combat, PTSD, drug use, and other such subjects will occur. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome back to the Stay Zero podcast. I have Jessica Garner here with me today. Thank you, Jessica, for coming in.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. And so start me off with kind of what your role is with the Austin Police Association and what you're here to talk to me about today.
Well, I'm the appointed vice president of the Austin Police Association. I'm also a police officer in Austin. At the association, I, advocate for our officers, their, working conditions, benefits, things like that. And then I also have, patrol responsibilities, as does everybody at the Austin Police Department right now due to our staffing crisis.
Oh, nice. That doesn't sound too good. The staffing crisis. How did you come across being a cop? What was your journey to that?
Well, it was a long one. I was actually probably the oldest one in my cadet class when I went through the police academy here in Austin.
What's the normal age for a police academy?
I would say mid-20s.
Okay.
You always have like that person that, kind of grew up in a cop family that, the moment they are 22 years old and eligible, like they are there and they're ready to go. And, by the time they're 45, they can retire and, live this great life with a pension. But most people, like it takes a minute to kind of figure out like, okay, this is what I want to do. We have a lot of veterans. So, they have their time in the service. So I would say like mid-20s is pretty average. Middle-aged woman is not average. And that's definitely what I was.
So you weren't a cop family?
Not a cop family.
Did you go to college?
I did go to college. I went to NYU, where I was in a program in the Gallatin School of Individualized Study, where you're kind of just given freedom to take classes across the university. And at the end of 4 years, you defend a bachelor's degree, kind of similar to the way you would like a doctorate.
Oh, wow.
On a smaller scale, obviously.
What did you go to college for?
So I had kind of a mix of like sociology, pre-law, psychology, just kind of this like cultural exploration of like law and politics and how they all just kind of go in this like cyclical nature. And we always kind of end up right where we started. And, is there a way to break out of that? And so far, the answer is no.
No. Did you have a goal? Did you want to be a cop then?
So, I kind of always wanted to be a cop.
Okay.
Growing up. Like my mom will tell you that number of times she had to tell me like Cops was not an appropriate television program for like, a 7-year-old to be watching. Like she would find me watching it and I would just be like, oh my gosh, like look at this. This is amazing. But you kind of grow up and you kind of create expectations for yourself. And sometimes you can lose track of like, what are you capable of, right?
Yeah.
And so I found myself going to law school. And becoming an oil and gas attorney.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, for about 8 years. And I looked around and I thought, well, like, this has been a good experience. I've found success in this job. Like, why am I not happy? Like, what is missing here?
Money wasn't enough.
The money was never enough.
Wow.
And that is like one of the biggest lessons that I have ever learned is that money does not buy you happiness. Now, it makes things easier. Don't get me wrong.
Like, buy you a boat.
It can get you a boat. It can get you a nice house. It can take some stress off, right?
Sure.
But at the end of the day, like what's in your bank account is never gonna make you happy.
Yeah.
And I come from, a family of service, not necessarily law enforcement, but my dad is a highly decorated Vietnam veteran, and while he had already left his time in the Army by the time I was born and growing up, that kind of servant heart, it doesn't just go away.
Sure.
And so, while becoming a cop is the last thing I think that he ever wanted or even expected from me, it's kind of his fault. He modeled this kind of like, life of service where, when somebody needs your help, you show up for them in whatever way, whether it's, in a volunteer capacity, whether it's your friend, whether it's your neighbor, like you show up for people. And I think a lot of that has to do with how I ended up here.
Yeah, your dad's a really interesting person. I had a great connection with him when we met. Did he talk to you about that at all?
Yeah, he did.
A little bit.
He's a maniac. I mean, like, if we're being honest, he's a total maniac.
He's hardcore. And yeah, I think I'm going to get him on the podcast as well. He's agreed. And so I'm hoping that we can.
So. You know, it's funny, like, you know, sometimes he sits there and he's like, how did we end up here? Like, you know, you have a great college education, you have a law degree, like you were successful in this, you know, this career. It's not like I was struggling as a lawyer.
Sure.
And it was just like throwing my hands up. He's like, how did we end up here? And I'm like, look in the mirror, man. Like, how do you think we ended up here?
Yeah. What do you think it is about being a policeman that scares him for you? Do you think he's scared?
I think it's
what do you
twofold.
think that is?
So, you know, never once has he discounted my capabilities. Like, he knows that, like, I take the job seriously. I train, like, I'm physically fit. I do all the things I need to do to keep me safe. Obviously, there's, like, an inherent risk with being a cop, right?
Sure.
It's just part of it. I think more of what concerns him, not as like, oh, is some maniac gonna, you know, shoot my daughter at work today? But it's like, what does the life of a cop look like? And kind of how does that maybe impact, you know, my personal life, my, you know, friendships, my family, things like that.
I definitely want to get into that.
Yeah.
Walk me through, what was the academy like for you? You said you were older, you were female. Were there a lot of females there? Was it what you expected? So we had a decent number of females. We graduated around 60 cadets when my class went through. And I think there was 11 females, which is actually a pretty good representation. The law enforcement profession teeters around 11 to 12% on average at a department. And that's kind of right where we stand at Austin Police Department. We definitely have hopes of recruiting more women, but in the academy, I would say, you know, being a woman was never something that like was a challenge for me. I was never treated like by my peers, by my instructors. I was never treated differently because I was a woman. Now, I was expected to perform at the same level as everybody else. Like, I didn't get, you know, an easier task, but I had the support I needed. The academy at different times was challenging, physically for sure, challenging. How so? What'd you do?
You know, I didn't grow up like getting into like street brawls. Like, you know, I was a high school cheerleader. So like there wasn't a whole lot of like, you know, rolling around like punching people.
Yeah.
In my childhood, like my home was very strict of like, you do not touch your sisters. Like, like there's no hitting here. Fortunately, I did a lot of training beforehand. Learned to box, like learned some ground fighting and stuff. But it's just physically demanding when you're not used to spending 8 hours a day, like getting your ass whipped, to then walk in and spend 8 hours and get your ass whipped.
Yeah.
But you know, it's as much a psychological game as it is like a physical game.
I've heard that the mat training was pretty difficult from a few of my friends. Like, you're going to get your ass whooped in there. Yeah. That's part of it, is to get your ass whooped.
It is. Yeah, because as much like, I am not ever going to be a jiu-jitsu like extraordinaire ever.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. But like, there are certain things you can do to keep yourself alive and safe.
Yeah.
For the 3 to 5 minutes it's going to take to get somebody else there.
Yeah.
And being able to fight through that and not give up is as much of the goal of that training as it is to learn to like pretzel yourself around somebody.
Yeah.
Right. So it was grueling. I have pictures of just bruises just covering my entire body, like just my arms, my legs, everything. But it works. Like, if you do it the way that you're taught, it works.
Luckily, I think people who train jiu-jitsu are very unlikely to fight a cop. Like, I see the most control in their emotions and their behavior and their lives from people who train to an art like that. And so as a policeman, I would think if you could just manage the position, control of your weapon so that they don't take it from you, like that's a major one,
weapon
right?
retention's a huge thing.
Absolutely. Like you can just control a fight without throwing a punch or really just defending yourself until, like you said, somebody comes along and helps out.
Yeah. And, in the point of like, you get in a lot of physical altercation. If you're doing your job right, that probably sounds wrong, but if you're doing your job right, like you're going to put your hands on people.
Yeah.
And you're going to need to control people that are different size than you. I'm 5'3". Very rarely was I like trying to control a 5'3" woman. Oftentimes it was a 6-foot man. And so
what was that like for you? First time you had to put your hands on a man.
On a really big man.
Yeah.
I will never forget it.
Yeah.
I had been cut loose off of my field training period for a very short amount of time. And this kind of crazy call comes out of a woman chasing a man in her vehicle. He's running barefoot down the street. She's chasing him and screaming about like a sexual assault that had just occurred. I get there, and this is quite honestly the largest man I've ever seen in my life. Like, he's huge. And I look over, and this woman is like pointing at him, has visible injuries. Like, there's no question here of like, who's the victim? Like, what happened? And I'm like, oh God. Like, I have to.
Don't make me whoop your ass.
Yeah, like I have to control this man. And based on the last time I looked at the map, like it's gonna be a minute before anyone else is here.
Yeah.
And so like my voice is what I relied on. Like I walked up to him and like I squeezed his arm, like I mean business, and I used a really big voice. I was like, "Put your hands behind your back now." And it's like, that presence that, like my uniform was sharp, my hair was pulled back. I pretended like I knew what the fuck I was doing, even though I was like the whole time in my head, I'm like, oh God,
Yeah.
And you know what? It's like, I cranked his arm behind his back, like I wasn't messing around. And, and fortunately he complied. But as I'm, kind of, we call it going out on this person, like I'm thinking like, okay, like what are my options here?
Sure.
If I put my hand on this guy and he pulls away from me, like what am I going to do about it? Because what I can't do is probably like fight this guy.
Right.
Like I'm going to have to like use leverage points. Like I'm going to have to get him to the ground, and then I'm going to have to get distance.
Yeah.
And like, so that's the constant, like, you're planning, you're, creating these like strategies for like, what am I going to do? Because oftentimes it's going to be a 6-foot man.
Yeah. I mean, I would think in my head, I would hope that they had the presence of mind to take it one step farther. Like, you know what? You might win this hand-on fight with me. You're not going to outrun the radio.
Nope.
And you're certainly not going to outrun the judge.
Right.
And if I walk into that courtroom with a black eye, how do you think that's going to go for you? Let's get through this situation in a calm manner, and we'll deal with it in the courtroom.
Right.
Otherwise, you are going to lose this battle, whether or not it's the physical altercation or not.
And that's that's your presence.
Right.
Like that message should be like subtly being told with your word choice and with, the tone of your voice, whether it's a loud voice, whether it's a soft voice, and just your presence,
Because I'm sure y'all watched them. I mean, maybe y'all didn't, but in the academy, we've all seen those videos of cops on the side of the road. They're by themselves most of the time, and they get a hold of a suspect that just ain't having it. And they beat the hell out of them. And in a lot of ways, they have the upper hand because until you know that they're not going to comply, like they'll act. Like, oh yeah, let me put my hands behind. And then it's just all of a sudden they catch you looking away, or they catch you doing something and they sucker punch you, or they pull a gun or whatever.
Or they run.
I
had that happen to me
really?
Not that long ago. Like I thought, this guy's probably not going to comply. But so I said, hey man, put your hands behind your back. And I went, took his arm, and like right as I was getting my handcuffs out, he saw his chance. And, looking back, it's like he had telegraphed to me what he was going to do because he turned his feet.
Oh,
and I didn't think fast enough to be like, hey, this guy's about to run. And he pulled his arm away and he took off running. But the one thing in a foot pursuit you're not going to do is you're not going to outsmart me. Like, I'm going to know my area better than you do.
Okay.
And I'm going to have my resources, my helicopter, my canine. Like, I'm going to get them there. And, we're like, you might be running now, but like, we will get you.
You're not going to outrun, I don't know, Fido.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nice. So do you have like a designated area that you patrol?
Yeah. So before I went to the association full time, I worked in a specific area and called Ida Sector, which is actually not far from where we are right now. But it's one of the smallest sectors in the city because it has the highest call volume.
Oh.
And it's a fairly violent area.
How long were you assigned to that sector?
3.5 years. That's where I went straight out of the academy by choice because, I'm one of those people like, if we're going to do this, we're going to really do it. And so that was my number one
dad
choice.
Up at night.
Mm-hmm. That was my first choice sector and I got it. And, you learn really fast.
I bet. What are, I hate to say favorite crimes. What do you walk into and you're like, okay, this is something that I like to solve or I like to deal with or a type of incident that I like to help people with?
Easy question for me to answer.
Sure.
Robberies.
Okay.
Yeah, robberies are my favorite. I'll call it that.
Yeah.
The thing about a robbery is you are oftentimes one trigger pull away from a homicide.
Mm.
We have a lot.
Are they usually armed?
We have a lot of armed robberies here. We have.
What are they stealing?
That's the thing is like a wallet, phone. Yeah. Really we have a huge problem with juveniles committing aggravated robberies in this town.
What makes it aggravated?
That's when you have a weapon.
Okay.
Or you seriously injure somebody.
So kids running around your district armed, robbing people. Why do you think? So my wife had her purse stolen at the Domain a few years ago. Okay. And this little fucker was so fast. Mm-hmm. Like, I think he was 14 years old.
Did he just rip it off her?
So we were sitting at a restaurant in the back patio, and I remember it was Veterans Day. I was with 2 or 3 other Marines, and we were eating lunch, and she got a phone call, and so she stepped away from the table, and she sat next to this like metal bar fence that was with a sidewalk on the other side. And I'm like, okay, she's having a conversation, whatever. And we continued on with our celebration of the holiday. And all of a sudden I hear, hey, that's my purse. And I look over and this kid had like reached over the fence, grabbed her purse and just took off running. And she looks at me and I'm like, shit.
Yeah, you better start running, man.
Husband time, right? Like, I have to do something, right? And so luckily I had shoes on and I take off running. I step on a chair. I step on a table. I leap over the fence and it's game on through the Domain. And I could not catch this little fuck.
Yeah.
And we're just running. And I had left my pistol in the truck, which is a good thing. I don't think I would have used that anyway. I know that would have not been a justified moment
probably,
to shoot somebody.
not ideal.
But like I was trying to catch him. And so I didn't know like if he is armed, like at that point, it's probably good that I don't have that because I could tell he was young.
Yeah.
And he found there was a vehicle driving around that had a single gray door. It was a white car. You could tell it was crap car. And he jumps in it and they take off. And I remember that I was yelling as I'm running. I'm like, stop that kid. And this guy walks out of like Macy's or something with bags and he jumps back and puts his hands back. I was like, you fucking pussy. And I run by and you could just see like I ripped the soul out of him when I ran by. I was so mad at that dude for just being a bitch. And I turned around and there must have been 6 or 7 dudes chasing him with me. Yeah. Which was awesome.
That's cool.
Like, we all lost, but it turned out he had an ankle monitor on. He was 14 years old, and his uncle was taking him to the Domain to steal purses. Sure. And is it the loophole of the juvenile justice system that they're using kids for that because it's not?
They're not that organized. They're not. Okay. They're not thinking. Yeah. Yeah, these are not criminal masterminds that we're dealing with. These are just like, like that kid probably runs faster than his uncle. That kid doesn't have a driver's license. Right? That kid may not know how to drive a car yet.
Yeah. And all they did was go to McDonald's and spend like $50 and then dumped it in the trash.
Yeah. That's the thing is like, this isn't, some sort of like organized like criminal operation. This is just like an example of like adults being absolutely like worthless and perpetuating a cycle of criminal behavior.
What I didn't expect was what it did to my family's mental stability, because my head immediately goes to, they have the keys to our car.
Our address.
They have our address. They have a vehicle that they can drive straight to my house. They know we're not home. And now it turned into like, how do I get home as quickly as I can before we really get robbed?
Right.
Or like sleeping on the couch in the living room for a week in case someone comes in to whittle the locks, like we change the locks on the house and then it's the credit cards and the social security cards and all the things. I'm like, you motherfuckers.
All for McDonald's.
So you could go to McDonald's, right? Like I'm glad that they didn't have more of a malevolent mission there, but man, you don't know.
Right. And while I say like, okay, these aren't criminal masterminds, right? Like you can't operate with that kind of level of complacency.
Yeah.
Like you still have to take all of those extra steps.
Change your locks, change your
to
credit
protect
cards,
yourself, protect your family. And, because every once in a while we do have kind of a more organized operation come in from, San Antonio or Houston. And I don't know if y'all remember when the jewelry store was robbed on Burnett Road.
No.
We had, I was still a pretty new officer at that time. Yeah, I think I was on FTO actually. So to be, 2020, when they, came in and, they shot a security guard. Just last week we had, Lakeline Mall being, robbed. And then they, I was actually working that day. Right now, all of our, if you're an officer or detective or corporal not assigned to a patrol position full time, you have to work what we call backfill. Non-patrol sergeants do as well, just because of our staffing. And so I was actually working that day in a patrol capacity. And, it's this idea that like we have, crime moving kind of, what I call west, right? Like, a lot of these, criminal, especially violent crimes have typically been an east of 35, predominantly an east of 35 issue. But, I'm just working a regular patrol shift and, on an afternoon, I think it was a Wednesday, mid-afternoon, early evening and, a couple, young kids, like probably, whether they're technically juveniles, probably 18, 19 years old, go into Lakeline Mall, rob a jewelry store and, just for the heck of it, they, shoot off 3 rounds into the ceiling of Lakeline Mall.
Wow.
And so then you've got like, this, do we have an active shooter? Like,
right.
What are we dealing with here? And, it, even as a cop, like the aftermath of that changed my behavior in that area. Like I had to go to Lakeline Mall to, pick up something, 2 days ago. And while I typically have like a gun with me, it was like, I did like a double check, like, okay, like this is in my, my pouch here, right? Like, okay, it's in there so I can get it out quickly. Those things where like, so even for a cop, like the aftermath of like a criminal event, even that I wasn't a victim of, I can change my behavior, much less had I been like a victim, like your wife, and your family.
Yeah. So these kids, just like the mall, that's a big thing to hit. Like they have security there. Are they just snatch and run? They're breaking through the glass. Is this an active, like, did y'all catch them?
So they are, that's an ongoing investigation.
Okay,
but,
sorry.
Yeah. So
this was last week, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So like I said, like I love robberies. Like I find them, like I said, they're one trigger pull away from a homicide or, an aggravated assault. And so I try to pick our robbery detectives' brains. Their supervisor has been a pretty great mentor to me. And so I try to stay pretty engaged with them. But, the Lakeline Mall one, as this was, our dispatch and, our computers were updating, I'm thinking, the jewelry store, I mean, use that loosely, that they chose, like, it was pretty central in the mall. And I know that mall pretty well because we do a lot of like active attack, like response training when like at nighttime, we'll rotate through there and we call it CAST, counter assault strike team training, and we'll train like with sim rounds for active shooters in the mall. So like I'm familiar with the setup of that mall because I've like been through that training a couple of times.
Yeah.
It's perfect. Like you've got the food court, then you've got multiple.
You might actually be called there,
and you've got multiple levels, right? So like where are you doing your casualty collection points? Like all these different things that you can train in that facility, and then flip the this time you're going to enter this way. Like it's a good place to train. But anyway, so the location of that jewelry store was pretty central. Like so they had to come into the mall, and then to get out, they went up an escalator to then go out to where they had parked. And I'm like, do they just are they not scared? Like, do they just know they're not going to get caught? Because the thing is Lakeline Mall has no security cameras.
Really?
None.
Wow. That's foolish.
And so I'm like, are they smart enough to know that? Or do they just not care? And do they know that like we are so short-staffed right now that the likelihood that somebody is able to get there fast enough to catch them on the way out is so small that.
Do you see many organized, like when we were growing up in the 80s, 90s, we had the serial killers, or we had like, what is that, Point Break, where like it's a gang of buddies that are knocking off, Do you see that anymore? I feel like that was the era of the 90s. Are people getting caught now, and so they don't get to do serial crimes in that way? Or what's changed in that? Well, you think that this is a gang of dudes that are just waiting for the next jewelry store to hit?
Probably not. So Austin is unique in that like we do not have a traditional gang structure like other major cities do. It truly is so bizarre that there's, I can't remember if they were a Department of Justice. They were based out of California, and they came to Austin kind of under this task to kind of evaluate like our gang situation here. Like, how are we handling it? And after like a couple of weeks, he was like, I don't understand what y'all are dealing with here. Like, I don't think I can be of help.
Wow.
Because it's
traditional.
It's not traditional. It's like, you've got like three guys that today are this random, 512 crew. And then, one of them pisses off the other. And then the next day, like they're, in this other gang with four members. And, then the next, they're like, oh, I'm a gangster disciple today. Like, it's not, we don't have like your Bloods, your Crips, like in all of your, sects, that you would typically see in a major city like Houston, Dallas, New York.
We have the population for it.
We do.
Yeah.
And I can't figure out why it hasn't developed here in that way. But I'll take it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the version of gangs that we do have, like they don't live by any like honor or code, which, that's one of the, I hate to say it, but like upsides of a gang culture that has been like established and that law enforcement understands, because their leadership, like they have principles. Now they're not necessarily principles that we would all, prescribe to, but like they're a little more predictable. They have a lot more control over themselves and over their people. Here, it's just like, well, I'm mad at you today, so I joined this other gang and someone shoot up your house. Wow. But yesterday, you and I were in the same gang.
Yeah.
And so it makes it's a unique challenge that we have here. But in terms of like serial killers, like organized crime, we have it. I mean, serial killers are over portrayed in the media, right? Like because they're so interesting. Like,
sure. But we don't see them anymore.
Yeah, but I mean the Gilgo Beach, right? Like we just had in Long Island, like the Gilgo Beach killer.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
This is a serial killer that's been operational for maybe more than a decade at this point. Maybe
in Long Island?
2 decades. Yeah, and like he was caught like a month ago.
Oh wow!
Like just a regular guy. Maybe like an accountant or something.
How did they catch him?
So I think it was an old piece of DNA evidence. Don't quote me on that. I'm not sure. But yeah, so
maybe that's why. I mean, the technology, the DNA stuff. I know they found some guy in San Diego from like a 23andMe sort of situation.
Yep. Yeah, so ancestral genealogy is a huge step for cold cases.
I never should have done that 23andMe.
So that's
my serial killer days are over.
So that's the issue, right? It's like when nobody realized or nobody had understood the potential for these like familial matches, nobody cared. And like they would submit to the database, like sign a waiver. Nobody reads a waiver anyways. And then law enforcement had this. I mean, that's how the Golden State Killer was caught, right? And there's this detective, Paul Holes. He's just kind of this like famous cold case detective, and he kind of helped develop this process for using, genealogy to solve these crimes. And but now, like, your average person that is like a little skeptical of government is like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
Like I'm not gonna, and I'll do my DNA, but I'm gonna check the box that says like you cannot put it in any database for law enforcement use.
Yeah, I definitely did it before I was aware of all of the government.
Yeah. So if any of your family members have been committing crimes, like it's your fault they're caught. But
that's awesome. Wow. Okay, so robberies are your bread and butter. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the thing that if I'm working patrol and a robbery comes out over the radio or over our computer, like, and everybody that I work with knows, like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually,
are you hoping to do that as a detective? Do you want to be a detective and chase those?
Yeah, so I'll be eligible to promote at our next corporal detective test, which will be probably the first quarter of 2024.
Okay.
And so I spend time, we call it riding out with the robbery unit. I go to a lot of trainings on my own, actually, like different like interview and interrogation trainings, like John Reed and Associates. Like the Reed technique has been around a long time.
What is that?
So the Reed technique is just kind of this like process for interviewing and interrogating. They use it overseas. Like a lot of like our CIA interrogators are trained under this, obviously with different rules than like a municipal law enforcement officer, but the principles remain the same of, how you're developing like a rapport, you're noticing cues, like how
you mentioned the feet on that guy earlier. I've read a few books on interrogation and just reading people and how to tell a lie. And one of the things that in a book, I can't remember what it was called. I think it was the language or something of every body, but every and body were separated. Yep. And one of the things he spoke about a lot was that they would put them behind desks that had nothing to cover their feet. And their main focus was on their feet. Yep. People will do, these nervous tics or and it doesn't tell them that they are lying, but it more or less, it displays an anxiety that they're feeling. And why are you feeling that? And then they'll dive deeper into that line of questioning. It was a fascinating book.
So I would take it even a step further. Like I won't let them sit behind anything because I don't want them to be able to
mask any kind of
their hands or arms on because the more things we can touch, the more stable and centered we feel. So like I don't want them to be able to lean on anything. I don't want them. So it's like if I ask you a question and like you're going to lie to me, or it's like a particularly messy question. Like we see this a lot when you're interrogating or interviewing a suspect of child abuse or sexual assault. Like, those are some really like, horrible subjects, right?
Sure.
And if you see somebody like take a big, like they're trying to separate themselves from the question, they're trying to separate themselves from the behavior. Or like, somebody has been sitting like that, with their feet on the ground, just like kind of relaxed or whatever. And you ask a question and there's like a big shift. It's like, okay, like, again, it doesn't tell me that you're lying, but it tells me that something about what I just asked you has had a physiological impact on your body right now.
Yeah.
And so you have to, be paying attention to their answer, but you also like, nonverbal communication is such a huge part of the way we communicate as humans. So we have to be paying attention to that also.
Yeah. Does your mouth and your body line up?
Yeah. And typically, like, if they don't line up, the body is telling the truth. Right?
Yeah.
Rarely is the mouth. Yeah.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Oh. So what are some of the harder ones? What are the calls that you like, man, I'll be glad if I'm the last one there?
Yeah. Suicides.
Yeah.
Those are hard.
Sure.
Now, interestingly, like suicides, like a gunshot wound to the head, like those are not as difficult for me, but and I don't know why. I can't figure out why. But like a hanging and anything with like, a kid, like like one of the worst calls I ever went to was the younger sibling of at a birthday party drown. And
like in the pool.
And like, pull her out, doing CPR, and it's just like
it's gut wrenching.
It is. And like you just hear the scream. Like I still get goosebumps sometimes when I hear the scream of the mom, like and really any like, anytime somebody comes home to find their loved one deceased, and it's like there's these gut wrenching, and like I have to stay in my professional face, like,
sure.
I'm doing CPR on this child or this, person that, somebody loves, like they're a brother, they're a daughter, they're a mom, they're a sister. And you just hear the outward pain of the people around you, and you have to stay professional, like, and because they're relying on you in that moment to,
you're the one they call
to be rational. And this is something that, I try to remind people that are, very critical of police all the time. It's like, no one's calling us because they're having a great day.
Yeah.
So imagine your job day in and day out is to show up when somebody is having the worst moment of their life. Whether they've just been a victim, whether they have been a victim over and over again and they haven't gotten, the justice that they want or need, or the support from their community or whatever it is, like, they feel like you've failed them over and over again, despite, you continuing to show up for them. Yeah. It can become, it can be grueling on your psyche.
That is for all policemen. My hat's off to you for doing the job. I was spoiled. I did the firefighter route.
If you have the upper body strength and want to be a first responder, be a firefighter. Yeah. Man, that is the life. I'm like, these fuckers out here playing pickleball, and I'm going to deal with this lunatic with a knife in the middle of 35. Like, man, if I could just do a few more pull-ups, I could have had the good life.
I mean, when we would go on these, like a hostage or whatever, I remember it's like, no, we can't go in. The police have to clear it first. It's like, ooh,
yeah.
I'm glad I'm not that guy today. Like, let us know when it's clear, buddy.
Yep. The classic stage.
Yeah.
Fire and EMS are staging. It's like, okay, well, I guess I'll head in then.
Yeah. But you're right. There's a spectrum, right, of adults doing things that adults do, and sometimes those things are tragic. My dad was a police detective in Georgetown and then justice of the peace in Williamson County. And I remember when I turned 15, he took me to see my first dead bodies. And it was really driven around driving. Right. He's like, I don't want you speeding. So he took me to see a crash, and there were, 3 deceased girls that were teenagers. And they just ran a stop sign and got T-boned, and that was it. And it probably slowed me down for 4 or 5 days, I would say. But I remember it, and the suicide, Georgetown Parks and Recreation director was accused of getting his granddaughter pregnant and killed himself in his garage. And stuff like that, you're like, wow, that's interesting. Probably did the world a favor there. Yep. But you're right. When it's an innocent victim or it's just the happenstance of tragedy, like those are difficult to shake off. Yeah.
And I'm a hostage negotiator also. And so,
really?
Yeah. And so I see a lot of.
What was that training like to do that?
So it's 80 hours. It's not as much as like you would think, but it's like pretty intense. A lot of it is scenario based training. So, we say hostage negotiators, but oftentimes it's, a barricaded subject, somebody that has just, committed a crime and they are refusing to exit, their residence, or they are, for example, like just, maybe a month ago now, we had, a guy shoot a cop and he refused to come out. Yeah. Like South Austin, he came out, with a shotgun. And after we conducted a welfare check, and he, shot at his neighbor's house. He, shot at the police officer, and fortunately it was, birdshot. So but I mean, his hand's all screwed up, his hand and his face, and then
the dog.
The officer from the birdshot. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And we returned fire and ended up,
Like, did you just want to go to prison for the rest of your life? Like what was your
So
what did you think was going to happen?
So they call hostage negotiators deploy with our SWAT. Anytime our SWAT team does a warrant service, anytime our SWAT team goes on a call out, we deploy with them. And there's various roles that we have, whether we're the one talking to the subject, like trying to make contact with them via phone, whether we're the one on the loud speaker, telling them to come outside, giving them instructions.
So you try to get them on the phone one-on-one. Mm-hmm. And what's the strategy for that conversation?
Yeah, so that's where the training comes in, and that's really what I will say, hostage negotiation training is, I've never been more exhausted than, I will put that on par with ground fighting as a cadet in terms of just the actual exhaustion that came with that training. Because you're on the phone and you are using, it's basically active listening. You're not lying to them. You're not creating a false narrative of what happened, but you are using, active listening skills like empathy, mirroring. You're trying to build rapport. And, while
So I hear you saying you don't want to leave the room.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, exactly. And sometimes you're just like, ugh. You're like, could you just fucking come outside? This is ridiculous.
It's 3 a.m.
Yeah, I am exhausted. Get your ass out here.
Someone bring us a J-Dam and blow this house up.
And the thing is, SWAT's sometimes putting gas in there, whatever they're doing, operationally. And you're just and the guy's like, my eyes are burning, and I'm like, well,
it's nice out here.
This is one of those things that, when we were first talking, I explained we could avoid, if you just come outside, just walk out your front door with your hands up and your hands empty and just, follow the instructions of the officers outside. It's I want to hear your side of the story. I understand there's always two sides. Let's figure this out. Let's work together, kind of creating this hey, we're a team. Mm-hmm. And, the biggest mistake a hostage negotiator can make is overestimating the rapport that they've built with somebody. Mm. Because if you try to put yourself on the same team of somebody that's I don't fucking know you.
Yeah.
You don't give a shit about me. You are back to square one.
Yeah.
So it's an art, I will say.
I'm sure the instructors that you train with know exactly how to play that game.
Oh yeah.
Wear
and
you out.
And And I actually went to, so at Texas State, they host every year an international hostage negotiation competition. And I was the lucky candidate that was the primary negotiator for the APE team this year. And I was on the phone with and this is the FBI is there, ATF is there. We've, I think it was Austria, they sent their national police force hostage negotiation team, international teams, Australia, Canada, tons of agencies from across the US. And I was on the phone as the primary negotiator for 8 hours.
Holy shit.
And it's this, ridiculous scenario that probably is never gonna, we're never gonna see anything where you've got 7 hostage takers, all this stuff.
Yeah,
and they're passing.
It's a bank robbery
and you're
movie.
having to build rapport with 7 different people and stuff. But it is truly exhausting. But good training, and all I cared about was beating the FBI team, and we did. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Well done.
So that was cool.
How do they measure that? How do you beat them? What made you win?
Yeah. So you have kind of experts in that field that have all these metrics that they're judging you by. And, sometimes it's things like the technology that you use. And for being the 10th largest city in the country, I will say that in terms of technology, the Austin Police Department is woefully behind the curve.
Really?
You'll see agencies, smaller agencies in Central Texas will show up with a command post that looks like it's out of Hollywood.
Wow.
And you're just oh my gosh. Whereas I use an iPhone on speakerphone, like my city cell phone.
With your clipboard.
Yeah, that the SWAT commander and SWAT lieutenant will have like a Bluetooth speaker connected to so that they can hear like if I'm making progress to direct like their operational choices.
So it's not the Samuel L. Jackson kind of scene that we're all envisioning.
Whereas like I'm pretty sure it's Georgetown. Like they come in with like this Mack truck that you're like, oh my gosh. Like,
wow.
Yeah. But you know, we make do. So, so there's things like that. So you have a whole team. Like hostage negotiating is a team sport. Like you do not do that alone ever.
Okay.
On a jumper, like if you have somebody that's gonna, you know, threatening to jump, like you're not gonna deploy like a whole team. You're usually gonna have two, a primary and a secondary, and then you're gonna have your like rappel team, like that's holding like.
So that's a very different style of hostage negotiation.
Yeah. So we're responsible for both.
Wow. What's the strategy for helping someone that just doesn't want to live anymore? Like, how do you get through to a person who no longer sees value in their life?
So I've had one like that, you know, I was like, nothing we're doing is working.
Yeah.
And at that point, you make a plan to grab them. And like grabbing somebody that is threatening to jump is rarely the answer. Mainly, it's a huge safety issue, right, for us.
You go over with them.
Right. But once you're in a harness and, you know, there was one where I looked at, you know, the supervisor on scene that he is an incredible negotiator, like can help me navigate when I feel like I'm just going up against a brick wall. Like he always helps me like zig and zag and gets back on track. And I looked at him and I was like, and he was like, we have to grab him. And so, you know, at that point,
you like sneaking up on him in the dark?
So,
like,
I'm still talking to him.
Like
I'm standing
person
there
to person or on the phone?
No, I'm standing there talking to him.
Like me to you?
Me to you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Little further away. He's
away.
like, stop there. I'm going to jump.
Right. Like I'm not like right up on him for a lot of reasons. I'm never going to be right up on anyone at work for any reason. Like I'm going to have like, you know, an appropriate distance.
Good shooting distance if necessary.
Well, yeah. And like, you know, I need a reaction time.
Yeah.
And distance is your best friend in reaction time situations. But, so I'm kind of, you know, my job then is I'm going to keep him engaged in conversation with me, while like the two SWAT guys behind me and then a couple patrol guys are going to make a plan to grab him. So I'm basically just distracting him and buying time at that point. And then, you know, I'm going to just kind of use a slower tone, like lower my voice, like make him have to like lean in if he wants to hear what I'm saying. And then I'm just kind of watching them, but without I can't keep shifting my eyes because, you know, even somebody that's not trained to pay attention to that stuff, like they pick up on human
They'll
cues.
Look where you
like
look.
If I start doing that, or if I'm like,
look behind him.
Yeah, look behind him. Or if I am pausing too long between like my words, they'll know I'm listening to my radio. So you have to be like pretty cognizant of like maintaining your normal behaviors so that you don't kind of like show your hand. Unfortunately, like they grabbed him. Like I kind of had him facing me. They grabbed him and he was really mad. And you know, we took him to a hospital to get some help. So,
you ever have any follow up with people like that to see what happens, or if they get their lives back in order? If they just
oftentimes
jump
the follow
without
up
telling
is
anybody
the next time that I see them. So no, in that like, you know, there is, you know, a privacy element, right? I could probably track somebody down, but I don't really want them to remember like that low point. Like if they are doing well, like I don't need to like unnecessarily remind them. Now, if they ever sought me out, 100%, like I would go to the ends of the earth to like meet with them, whatever they needed.
Yeah.
But if they are motoring along and like, I'm not going to try to like re-engage with them because I don't know how maybe that's going to impact them.
I think there's probably some self-preservation to that as well. Like you don't want to be emotionally attached to every case you get assigned. You would drown in that. Talk to me a little bit about how you manage that stuff.
Well, sometimes I manage it well, sometimes I don't.
Sure.
Just like anybody. I have a very robust mental health kind of support system in place.
Is that through the department or in your personal life?
So that's personally what I do. Our department does offer all types of therapy, EMDR, all the things that.
What's EMDR?
So that's the eye movement desensitization.
Laser psychedelics.
Yeah.
I've heard of this. I've never done it, but I've heard about it.
So, the research shows that EMDR is one of the most effective ways to process trauma. And
have you tried it?
Yeah, I've done tons of EMDR.
Really?
And it's I can honestly say that it is worth every penny that
really
that it costs.
What happens? How does that work? What are they doing?
So the way that you have this kind of process where you are talking to this person that's trained in that. You can't just get any therapist off the street. It's a very specific training that they do. And they walk you through kind of these so you have an event. So let's, for example, the child that drowned, so I'll say the child that drowned, okay, what did it feel like when it was happening? What do you notice when you think about it now? So they kind of create this roadmap with this particular event, because the whole challenge with trauma is when you think about an event, if you start to have that same physiological response as if it were happening again, that's the dangerous way that trauma continues to live within us. PTSD, all those types of, kind of trauma disorders are all hinged on this idea that we are reliving this event over and over and over again, and not in a way that it's that happened. It was terrible. I recognize that. It's oh my God, it's happening again right now. And that's what our body and our brain think is going on. And so through this process, whether it's vibrations of some kind, some device, and it's you can turn it up, you can turn it down, but basically it engages each side of your brain, and it it'll tap back and forth. So you're holding it and it'll be zzz, 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 going back and forth through each hand. And it causes your brain to subconsciously activate both sides. Because the reason that the trauma is still living in you in the way that it is because the neural pathway hasn't been created to transfer it into the side of the brain that it's meant to live in. So by activating both sides of the brain while you talk about that event in this safe environment starts to develop that neural pathway for you.
Wow.
Sometimes it could take 5 or 6 sessions to even start to break through the barrier of that traumatic event. It's just, different things have affected us in different ways. And there are other times where, your brain has kind of started to learn, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing when I feel both sides activating. This is why we're doing it. And certain things can be processed more quickly. But even from childhood traumas, anything that, may still bring up emotions for you now, you can address all of that through EMDR. In crisis zones, after a natural disaster or something, they'll do a different version of it where it's okay, for Red Cross or something that is just day in and day out, seeing just horrors of what it has occurred. They'll do a butterfly tap like this. And because they don't have time to sit around and process what they saw that day, because they're going to see it again the next day. So that's more of okay, I'm going to stay on top of it as this, event unfolds. And then, they're in a better position to process that trauma long term.
Wow. So you've done the EMDR.
Mm-hmm.
And is there like an integration after that you can do on your own? Or did you feel like you were, like it fixed you or it healed you of that issue?
So like, I don't think anything ever fixes us.
Sure.
Like that, this is like, this is an ongoing journey. And the thing about like, the job I do is that there's always something new.
Mm.
And it's fascinating because like, I could see a torso on the side of the road after a motorcycle collision and like, well, I mean, that sucks.
It was down to his last
Yeah,
leg.
like, ugh. Like, ugh.
Yeah.
Like, yuck. And then be like, okay, on to the next one.
Yeah.
Or that day, like I see a torso and I'm just like, oh my God, like I hate everyone and I hate everything.
Yeah.
You don't know what's going to like, what is going to impact you day to day. And so oftentimes like you may have to like readdress an event or you have something new that you address. But I think it's an ongoing process. Like there's no way to, unless you quit whatever you're doing that like exposes you to the horrors of this world and just live in like, a fantasy land of rainbow and unicorns, like there's no fixing anything, but you have to remain committed to like addressing these issues. Otherwise, like that's how, people find themselves, drugs, alcohol, suicide.
Sure. Is there anything that they do in the academy to prepare you for the trauma that you see?
So we have different like instruction blocks on officer wellness. And in those blocks, we kind of talk about the different types of like behaviors we may start to see in ourselves that are a reflection of traumas we may encounter. So they're not doing it's not like an exposure therapy. They're not like showing us like traumatic photos or traumatic videos. Now, like when you have your homicide block of instruction, like you are seeing photographs of homicide scenes.
Yeah.
So there's really no way to actually like put you in a situation to like experience the trauma, right, until you actually do it. But so what they do is they focus on like healthy lifestyle choices, like maintaining, physical fitness, especially like focusing on certain types of physical fitness training in order to kind of like recalibrate your nervous system for like, this is something interesting. Like when I first started, the 4 days that I would work, like I'd have energy, like I'd be good to go. That first day off, I would get like, I'd be fine in the morning and then it would get to be like 2 or 3 p.m. because I worked the evening shift and I wasn't getting the adrenaline spike that my body was accustomed to the last 4 days. And I would just feel like I'd been run over by a truck.
Wow.
And I'm like, I haven't done anything today. Like, why am I so tired? Like, I slept last night. Like, it's a day off. Like, I should feel great right now. And what it is, it's like I had become reliant over the last 4 days of that adrenaline spike. And now I was, suffering from like basically this chemical imbalance.
Withdrawal.
Yeah. And so like what they tell you to do is to do like a high intensity interval training because it spikes your cortisol basically, which is not ideal for other reasons, but like that'll kind of like get you recalibrated, your central nervous system functioning appropriately, and you'll be able to function throughout your week.
I think in general, just healthy diet and exercise
and sleep
and sleep.
Yeah, and sleep is the thing that cops
are really underrepresented in mental health and managing things like if you're not doing those, at least before you seek medicinal assistance or start hitting the bottle or whatever it is that people do, like you got to have those pillars in place.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Like if you don't have kind of your basic like nutrition and like human functions operating correctly, then it doesn't matter how much therapy you do. Like,
Which
you're still going to feel like shit.
It's hard to eat healthy on shift.
Yeah. Like, I will tell you, like having a gluten allergy is like a blessing and a curse. But the blessing is that like at 2:00 in the morning, at like 35 in St. John's, like there's not gluten-free options.
Yeah.
And so I had no choice but to pack food. And that was a savior. Like I would watch like my shift mates, like they'd be going through Whataburger like for the second time in the night. And and I mean, of course they're all dudes. And so it like doesn't, but if I did that, like I literally would not fit in my patrol car. Like I'd be so fat, but so I benefit. So my food allergy is the one thing that like kept my nutrition on track when I was working patrol full time.
I have the same issue, and I feel the same way where like I can't drink beer.
Yeah.
And so beer and wheat and a lot of the things started, being 30, like my whole body changed somehow and it hasn't been fun at all.
No.
But you're right. Like when you can't eat that shit, it makes you find things that you can eat and prepare for it and pack better food.
Yeah.
And blessing in disguise for sure.
Yeah. So the other things at the academy they do is they just bring in, like EMDR specialists, like to educate us on like that resource and make sure that we know like how to access it. And then we have a peer support unit that like, they're getting calls all the time of like, because it's not a therapist, it's not a city counselor. It's like, you can call and be like, hey, like I need help. And it's, anonymous. And so they just give us access to our resources and try to help establish healthy living.
You're also living in the world that, I don't know if it's our government or just the structure of our society, where you're managing the things that are really kept away from the public.
Oh, yeah.
Like grandma dies, you don't just go see grandma. She goes to the mortuary.
The medical exam.
Where she gets, embalmed and put with makeup and her dress. And the only dead people you ever see, if you see them, are laying in a casket in a very calm manner, looking their best.
Yeah.
And that's not reality.
No. Like that, yeah. Like you're not seeing them when they have the bullet holes in them.
Right. And you don't see that. And, the children, all of it. And so it's like someone dies, we usher in and we take it away. And then they don't see it again until it's made pretty.
Yeah.
And so I feel like society has a very naive perspective of the realities of life. And it can feel lonely when you don't.
Right.
You're exposed to it.
And it's also not like, it's not dinner conversation, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm not going to go to my parents' house and like, my sister's in town and like, I'm not going to sit there and be like, man, I showed up and this guy, like he'd been shot 4 times and like I could hear, that breathing, that where you're like.
The bubbly.
Yep. The bubble. Like you hear it and you're like this person's going to die, but like I have to try.
Right.
So like I'm going to stick my finger in this hole and then I'm going to like try to put a tourniquet over here. I'm going to have somebody else bring a chest seal and like,
Yeah.
And then you hear the gurgle and you're like.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, do you feel like...
And they're like, can you pass the potatoes? Right? Like, like you're not going to do that.
This ketchup looks a lot like that.
Man, this is really like familiar. Right.
Do you think like you keep to cops or y'all have little cliques where you get that opportunity to do you like some of the, was it executioner humor or the morbid humor where?
Yeah, it's bad.
Yeah.
Like it's real bad.
Yeah, I bet.
And
I think it's a defense mechanism.
You have to.
Yeah,
like,
you've got to release it somehow. You've got to sometimes make light of it.
If you take everything that we do seriously, like you will not survive.
Yeah.
You won't survive the career. You won't survive your life. We had this insane situation where this car like flew off of I-35 and like in the middle of somebody committing an aggravated robbery in a parking lot and the car lands on the suspect and like, it was ridiculous, right?
So,
and I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, listen to this wild ass story. And my sister's like, oh my God, those poor people. And I'm like, never mind. Like,
no, it was totally awesome.
Yeah, I'm like, the suspect got smushed. He was smushed. And his girlfriend was just like crying. And like, there was like bootleg alcohol everywhere because the car club was coming. And I'm like, and she's like, oh God. And I'm like, all right, well, this actually was hilarious.
Yeah, like the universe said, not today, motherfucker.
Yeah,
like,
because my whole shift was like, we're laughing our asses off.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Because we're like, divine intervention.
Yeah.
Like, here we go.
Karma strikes
again. Like we couldn't wait to call detectives and be like, guess who is no longer your problem?
Yeah.
And let me tell you why. And yeah, we have it. It's like, it's off. The way we talk is awful. It's not to be disrespectful to like a victim. It's not to be disrespectful to a family. It's not. it is a coping mechanism, it is a defense mechanism, and it is the way that like you finish up what you're doing there. And then you go down the road to, Granny Frickett, who, thinks that somebody keeps knocking on her door and she's scared.
Yeah.
Because like you have to transition from that chaos to helping that, community member that has no idea what you've just done or what you've been involved in. And you have to provide like a high level of service to her just like you do everyone else.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's a coping mechanism and it's a necessary one. Where it gets hairy is when the people who aren't a part of that group overhear it.
Right.
Because then the feels come out. Right. And then you shouldn't be an officer because you were cavalier about
thing.
Right,
yeah.
Right. It's like, man, y'all should have been in the Marine Corps. I got slapped with a dick in a bag.
Yeah.
Like, like what?
Right. And it's like, that's why like, we have this, you got to be your brother's keeper. It's like, hey, we're still out here. Like, let's go rally up over here. Or, hey, like, we're done here. Like the call is over. Like, let's turn our body cameras off. Like, the whole body camera thing is like, you're being filmed.
Yeah. All the time.
Every single thing you do. Time.
What's your opinions on the body cameras? Good, bad, and different.
So, I don't know any different. Yeah. Right. So like, my opinion on it is it's the only thing I know. Now I will say that they oftentimes are more helpful for officers than they are harmful. I personally have had to go to internal affairs for excessive use of force allegation. I used force on this particular call, but it was force that was within law and policy, and my body camera very much supported what I did and why I did it, how I did it, all those things. If an officer is is critical of a body camera policy or wearing a body camera, they either are not used to doing it, and there's nothing cops dislike more than change. Like, we don't like it when things stay the same, and we don't like change. Like, those are two things cop hates the most. And so it may just be an unfamiliar thing. So like, but we've had body cameras at APD for,
quite a while.
Yeah. I mean, we're going on maybe probably getting close to a decade. Like, we're actually the pilot for the United States Marshal Service implementing body cameras. Our Lone Star Fugitive Task Force actually just got recognized by the Marshal Service for being like that pilot agency and task force and showing like, the highest level of body camera usage in, in this task force world for Marshal Service. And like, if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing now, like at APD, have we taken it too far where like, if you are heard using profanity on your body camera, like that is grounds for your butt in internal affairs? Like,
really?
Yeah. Like, we just modified our policy where you can like justify profanity on body camera if like it is an excited utterance and not at a person, basically.
Profanity is a very useful part of our language.
Well,
you want to control somebody, yell fucking stop.
Yeah.
Like it has an effect.
Show me, like, hey, show me your hands.
Motherfucker.
Show me your fucking hands.
Yeah.
Like, I am not fucking around right now.
That's an escalation of force.
Yeah. So, so now we have this kind of caveat where we can like,
cuss
in a stressful situation, we have an excited utterance or we use it for emphasis to,
that's not
to gain voluntary compliance, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, if you're a good writer, like you can make it work. Sure. If you're not, like, best of luck. Like, call me because like I will likely be assigned to your internal affairs case as your union rep.
It's funny. That's so true. Like, I've heard when I was in the Marine Corps, it's like, man, you better learn how to write because you're writing these after actions. And same with the fire service. Like, the way that you articulate is very important.
And you could do everything correctly. And if you do not write it down in that offense report and articulate exactly what you did and why you did it, like,
you're screwed.
And it's hard for me as somebody that represents people in internal affairs all the time. Like, I have to figure out how to like get this articulation through, like, because I'll see what they do and I know what they're thinking and I know why they're doing it. And then I look at their report and I'm like, dude.
Yeah. You got to put that in there.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
Why didn't you write this? Oh, well, I didn't think about it. Okay.
I have a GED.
Yeah.
Don't blame me.
I'm like, oh my God.
You didn't go to NYU.
No. Yeah. 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 I will say, that law degree is a great tool for report writing and, PC affidavit, search warrants, like all those things, I kind of catch on to pretty quickly just because I have I just have the background in understanding like, what you need to say when you're talking about elements of a crime. And
were you working when we had the riots in Austin and they were hitting the Capitol and doing all that?
So
what was that like?
I was,
you were new.
I had just gotten cut loose. Like, so I didn't have a training officer anymore. It was
chaos.
I will never forget the day that like DPS has their shit lined out. Like DPS is, despite the Austin news media's criticisms of DPS, like that is a highly functioning organization. From the way they show up, like pressed, like looking good, to like the way they conduct themselves. Like that is a quality organization. So when you have like a lot of officer needs assistance, call them O&As, coming from the Capitol grounds from DPS because they're outnumbered and getting overrun, it's like, oh fuck.
Yeah.
So we end up, they pull all of us that are working patrol down. I think we went to Republic Square, and then we caravan in our patrol cars over to the Capitol. We parked in the Capitol parking lot, and we went and we created like what we call mobile field force, basically, to help DPS because the Capitol was getting overrun. And like, I don't know what I'm doing. I've been a police officer for 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm just like standing there and, people are yelling, but mostly at this point it's, just name calling, Okay. So I'm just standing there listening to people like berate me. I can do that. Like
try to provoke a response that they can put you on YouTube.
And so we very specifically are trained at the academy. Like you have people yelling at you, because you can't respond. Like you are the professional in that situation and you have to remain so. And so staying there, whatever. About 2 hours into that, they're like, Garner, Williams. They just start like picking people like, hey, come over here. Okay. And I get basically like I'm dogpiled into a raid van. And I've just got like all these sweaty dudes like on me. And I'm like, and I have like, I've got my riot helmet, first time I've ever put it on. And the next thing I know, the door to this fucking van opens and I'm standing on I-35. I was like,
oh shit.
What the fuck? And there are rocks. We are getting pelted by rioters. Just like I still have dents in my riot helmet from being hit with a rock. Wow. And the only thing I had and at that point, all the 18-wheelers were stopped on 35. And so we were able to use them for cover. But like there's still like, it was both sides, like, because there's like this grassy and like embankment that you can come up on the west side of 35. And then there's also this slope on the east side of 35. So it was kind of coming from both directions. And then they're like, we have to get these 18-wheelers out of here. Like this is a major thoroughfare. Like we have to move traffic.
Yeah.
So they leave. We end up having to shut down the road because they swarm 35. I look up and there's a guy making a Molotov cocktail.
That's a problem.
And I was like, and again, I'm like, 5-minute officer. I'm like,
can I shoot this guy?
Excuse me. This man over here.
He's threatening death by fire.
Like, I think he's making a Molotov cocktail.
Yeah. He ain't going to drink it.
Yeah. And so like, I'm just thinking, I'm like, I do not remember this scenario.
Yeah.
The fucking police academy.
Yeah.
What am I doing? Right. And, we had like, we had pepper spray. We had, less lethal shotguns, which I won't talk about. But, we were doing everything we could. What people forget is that I-35 is the only way to access our trauma hospitals. Mm. So it is not a matter of like city pride that we're like, we have to keep this roadway clear and moving. Like it is truly the access point for trauma hospitals.
Yeah.
So like there is no like, oh, we'll just shut it down till things cool off. Because otherwise like we can't get people the medical care they need.
Right.
So like it's more than just like
it becomes life and death.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think that people realize that when like we take what they perceive as like too much action to clear a roadway. Well, there's a lot of consequences associated with this roadway not being active right now.
Yeah.
That like you as regular citizen just aren't considering.
You're mad that you got hit with a beanbag and that guy's trying not to die before he can get through the street.
And he's completely innocent in this whole thing.
Right.
Like.
Right. He got in a car wreck.
Right.
Or whatever.
Or he's having like, a heart attack.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is. Like, and so, yeah, that was a wild day. I still do not even, sometimes I still can't even comprehend, like, just getting out of that raid van in the middle of I-35, it was surreal to me. It's like,
what the hell, guys?
What?
Yeah.
The fuck? Yeah. And then for, I think, almost 2 months after that, we would work our regular patrol. Because at that point, we were all downtown, right? The rest of the city was left for none. There was looting. It was chaos. So we had to figure out a way to like maintain the correct like number of people downtown, but we couldn't just abandon the rest of the city indefinitely. So after that, we would work our regular patrol shifts, which we work 410s. We would typically get held over for like 4 to 6 more hours. So we were working about 16 hours. And that, that happens now because of staffing. And just like late arrests. And, I say we work 410s. Very few people at this place actually only work 410s.
Just the chief gets that.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure the chief is like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
God.
Like that job is
wouldn't want
horrible.
That
Yeah. Like, my God. But then on your RDOs, your regular days off, you had to go to the training academy, park your car there, and you were then bused to our main headquarters to be mobile field force for the riots. So like nobody, it didn't matter what your rank, nobody had a day off for, I think we went over 40 days of that cycle.
Wow.
And it was a beating.
I bet.
Mm-hmm.
Brand new officer stepped into that.
Yeah. It was like, oh my God.
What did I get into?
Yeah. It was wild. Mm-hmm.
Was that kind of an exciting experience, or were you like, what the fuck did I just get into?
So at first, like,
you're the tip of the spear. You're like, let's do this.
Yeah,
This is
I'm
adrenaline
like,
rolling.
right.
And then you're
yeah.
like, okay, it's been 30 days.
Right. There is, I would say even like, I would say a week or two in, like there are only so many times you can hear people just spit vitriol at you before you're like, I need a break or I am going to respond in a way that is not ideal for me, this person, or this agency. Yeah. And so then we would like stand out there for 45 minutes and then we'd come inside for a break. We'd had to have these like rotations because like standing out there just,
How did you manage that?
Like at some point you have to rely on the humor. Like I will never forget this grown woman standing in front of me, looking me just dead in the eyes. I don't know if you guys mark this as explicit, but this is about to be explicit.
It's Zero Fox. Let's go.
Okay. Yeah. And she looks at me and she goes, "Hey, bitch." And I'm just saying, she goes, "I'm going to rip your pussy top to tail and show you what gangster is."
Jesus.
I said,
"Don't threaten me with a good time."
I said, "Ma'am, are you serious right now?" And my supervisor was like, that'll be enough, Garner. Like, you're done. Yeah. Like, bitch, I'm going to rip your pussy top to tail and show you my gangster.
Wow. It's like, what does that even mean?
Right.
Like,
and
how?
I was just like,
Huh.
Cool.
Yeah.
Like, I dare you to touch me.
Yeah.
Like, I dare you.
Please do.
Yeah. Please touch
give me that opportunity.
Please touch me, because then we'll really show you what.
Did y'all have dogs or anything with you keeping the crowd line back? Where you just with shields?
Can you imagine? Like,
I've seen some of them where they brought dogs.
Public
Those dogs
outroar here would
people
absolutely like the buzz phrase of community values, having our canine, and truthfully, like, our canine is not trained for crowd control.
Yeah.
Our mounted unit does crowd control. That's also very controversial.
With the horses?
Mm-hmm.
Why is that controversial?
Oh, because they think it's like violent and aggressive, and that
the crowd or the horses.
The crowd. The crowd thinks the
horses are violent. Anything that's effective against them is against the rules, right?
Yeah. So yeah, we had shields. And we had our like sticks, it's like, get back. Yeah.
What were they trying to achieve?
So ultimately, like, I think the grand plan, especially for like the local loud activists here in Austin, is like they want to abolish the police.
So provoke you into an action that allows them to sue or inflict some sort of policy change to disintegrate the police department.
Yeah. Their goal is to basically get rid of the police department.
To use your own policies against you. It's the Geneva Convention, right? Like, these are the rules you must go by, but none of your enemies will. Right. And if they can entice you into breaking your own rules, we'll consume you ourselves.
So, and that's
a hard thing to work under.
It's almost impossible. And we're experiencing that now with like the use of a less lethal shotgun. Like, historically, the less lethal shotgun is a very effective tool. Mm-hmm. Again, like, I won't go into anything about like the protests, the riots, like, everything going on with that, because it's still, an ongoing situation. Like, we have 22 officers indicted for felonies.
Really?
Right now. Yeah.
For using less than lethal force that the department approved of.
Yeah. And they used it. They used it as they were trained to use it, and they used it at the direction of supervisors. And we have 22 indicted officers that,
wow,
for felonies. It makes things very stressful.
Is that serious, or do you think more of just a political move to silence or to appease that mob? Like, here they're indicted, we're going to do the investigation, but there's really no grounding for.
I think the district attorney here would do anything and everything he could to find those officers guilty, to convict those officers. Yeah. We are in a very, the district attorney in Travis County right now his whole platform was anti-police.
How does that, what's the long-term strategy for a district attorney who relies on the police to go out and find people for him to convict, to then turn on the people that he relies on to provide him with a career?
Yeah. So his long game is not necessarily to like convict people. And just as kind of like a matter of like how a district attorney, like what their duty is, like their duty is not to convict people. Their duty is to ensure that justice is served. So my definition of justice is probably very different than his.
Sounds that way.
Yeah. Like his platform is very much centered on like this, kind of second chances, rehabilitation. Like these criminals are victims of circumstance. Like, we need to fix this problem from the ground up, which I'm not saying I disagree with. Like, I do think there are certain things that like lead to criminality. I don't think that you get to be a criminal unchecked. I know like poverty, whether it's, socioeconomic, whatever the situation is, there are things that lead a person to a level of criminality that maybe somebody else wouldn't under different circumstances, and creating a different environment for them to be a successful part of this community is ideal. It's just not realistic.
Right. They're not stealing bread.
Right. And I will tell you that any I have come across very few people, but I have come across them that truly are stealing like basic necessities. Won't go into like the demographics of who those people are. I have never arrested one of those people, and I've always bought them a full cart of groceries because that is an act of desperation to meet a basic human need. That is not pointing a gun at somebody and taking the money that they earned to send to their family while they were selling tamales on the side of the road.
Right.
And pistol whipping them. Like, that is violence. Like, that is, targeting somebody that is vulnerable. Like you're going to jail.
Yeah.
But like, you individual that just needed peanut butter and bread, like, let's get you some groceries. Don't do that again.
Yeah.
Like, if I catch you doing it again, like, this isn't the route we're going to take.
Right. Talk to me about the effect that's had on the department. You've mentioned the staffing shortage that Austin's dealing with. Yeah. Why is that going on, and what are they doing to try to recruit?
Yeah, so we have a recruiting issue. We have a retention issue. Right now, I actually heard a number of under best practices, the Austin Police Department should be operating with 2,230 officers. We are hovering around 1,480 right now. Wow. And based on rates of attrition and our ability to hire, like, that number is going to continue to drop. And it's going to drop at a high rate, and we are going to be facing a much bigger problem than we already are in, unless something drastic changes. And I can't even tell you what that drastic thing would need to be. But we have a couple issues here in Austin specifically. District attorney is one. Like, why would you want to come work somewhere that you put your uniform on every day and you live in fear of indictment? Now, I will tell you, like, if a police officer breaks the law, like, they should be held accountable as much as anybody else, if not more so. Like, we have a special privilege, in our profession. We are given the ability to take away somebody's freedom. We should be held to a higher standard. What we should not be is targeted by a progressive politician that doesn't believe police have, like, a place in society. So that's one of the big things. Like, why would you not go work in Georgetown? Why would you not go work in Pflugerville? Why would you not go work in Williamson County, Hayes County, like San Antonio even? Like, their district attorney sucks too, but like, they have a much more supportive community. Like, why would you not go work in these other places where there's a lower cost of living and your freedom is not at stake in the same way that it may be here?
Yeah.
The other issue we have is the high cost of living here in Austin. I am one of the few people that live in Austin and work in Austin. Our officers can't afford to live here.
Yeah.
We have, there is a national recruiting issue, like, especially after the 2020 riots. Like, we kind of have this, it's almost similar to like when my dad came home from Vietnam, like, he was not treated as a hero.
Yeah.
He was treated as like the scum of the earth, and that forever impacted him. And that created a really big issue for recruitment for, all of the armed
public
forces.
Perception. Yeah.
So it was a PR thing. And so then we had, the whole like support our troops. We had the yellow ribbons. We had like, they made it okay again to support, and obviously like 9/11 was a huge part of that, right? Like, how could you not support the people that are going to like, intersect this group of people that just destroyed our world? But we have a PR problem. Like, policing has a PR problem on a national level. And so, there's going to have to be a shift in perception. Like, you'll even see it in like toy stores. You see a lot of firefighting like toys. You see a lot of ambulances. Like, you don't see the same number of like police toys as you used to.
I hadn't thought about that.
Like, like my niece and my nephews, like, they think I'm cool. One of them doesn't. They think it's like a big joke. They're like, you're not a police officer. Like, because, I'm a girl and, girls aren't police officers. But like, generally, like, you don't see the same level of, like, you don't see little kids running up to cops, like, thinking we're heroes.
Yeah.
You see them running up to firefighters.
Yeah.
Like, you know, they see the big red truck and it's like.
I've had to talk to my own kid about it because he's like, I don't want to talk to the cops. They take you to jail. They're bad. I'm like, what? No,
like,
man.
And where are they getting this?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I'm like, no. I mean, they could take you to jail if you don't listen to your father. But.
Yeah. But it's like, how do, you know, so if kids are getting this message, like, no one's going to want to be a cop.
It's true. And then I feel like it becomes a cycle that inevitably spirals down, right? If nobody wants to be a cop, then the standards have to be lowered to acquire them, to recruit them. So who are the quality of people that you want to be officers? Because you're going to end up with a bunch of GEDs that didn't have any other option. And so they're being placed into positions of severe power and control and influence. And then you run into issues like Uvalde where they don't want to go in.
But they don't act.
They don't act because maybe they weren't prepared or maybe they shouldn't have been hired in the first place, but there wasn't another cadet to choose from.
Right.
And you know, that was a big turning point for me where I'm like, what the fuck is going on, guys? Like there should have been a pile of dead cops in the doorway trying to get in there.
Yeah.
So he didn't even have a round for another kid. Like what other moment do you dream about?
Yeah, like
in a job like that.
Yeah, like I'm not like obviously like I would not wish a situation like that on anyone or anything, but I have zero hesitation that like I don't care if I'm by myself. I don't care if I have 5 people. I don't care if I have 10 people.
Yeah.
Like I am going in there and I'm going to solve the problem because like we even run this scenario at our academy where like you'll have somebody that like it's like, okay, there's like you're driving to a call, it's at a school, somebody's there with a gun, and then like as you approach the range or wherever this school is pretended to be, you start to hear rounds pop off. And like if you don't throw your car in park and haul ass in there, like and put bullets on the bad guy, like if you're like trying to get on the radio or
look busy,
call like you're like, okay, I'm waiting for backup, it's like like cut, and it's like we need to go have a serious conversation.
Oh yeah.
Like if you are too scared in training to go in there, like what are you doing here?
Yeah.
And so like I go out to our academy for role plays and like we still run that scenario, and like we only graduated 19 people this last cadet class.
Really? You had 60 in yours.
60, yeah. There's been classes of over 100 in the past. Right now, like our target is 120 per class, and we graduated 19.
Ouch.
And I will forever say, like I will operate with less people as long as they are good people. Like don't give me somebody just because I need a warm body.
Yeah.
Because like
they're almost more of a liability.
They are more of a liability. Like, and every once in a while, in every class, like somebody will slip through the cracks, like they'll fly under the radar, and then you get them out on the street, and you're like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah,
like you're out of here, man.
Yeah. I couldn't imagine a better way to die than to hunt down the person killing innocent children. Like you're gonna die eventually. You want it to be 80 years old, laying on your bed, thinking back at that one moment,
like that I could have.
You were tested, right? Because it's like we all signed the dotted line.
Right.
If this opportunity comes, or if I am placed in combat, I will do my job as a Marine, as a police officer. But you don't really have control over when it happens and if you're working that day, or if the gunfight happens on your patrol. Like all you can do is put yourself out there. But to have that opportunity and to miss it, like and
you have to constantly have that conversation with yourself. Like you need to be.
You got to be checked in.
Yeah. Like, am I still?
Yeah.
Like, am I still going to run into that building?
Yeah.
Am I still going to handle business when business needs to be handled? And like, if at any point, you waver, like you have to have a really like frank conversation with yourself. Like, should I still be showing up for this job every day?
I'm sure that's hard. Like you're looking, I got 20 years for retirement. I just need 4 more, but I'm really not feeling this job. Like I'm not as fast as I used to be. I'm not real I don't shoot very.
Yeah.
Like, I've done some training with some officers and some of them are legit. And then others, I'm like, man, you shouldn't even have a gun. Like what's happening right now? It's like train. And they're always averse to training. Like the ones that can't shoot stand in the back. Like, come on up here. Like, you need to be here the most. No one here is going to talk shit or make fun of you, but you are not going to get better.
But I will talk shit if you don't try.
Don't even try.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that whole situation.
There is like this weird dichotomy of like, you have like the group of officers that's like training all the time. Train. And it's like, they're good at it. Like they're good at what they're doing because they maintain their skills. And then you have this other group of that it's like, my God, like, can you please train more? Like, just take a lap around the building. Just run 1 lap, please. Or like, just, go to the range 1 time, please. Just once.
What do you think do they not face the need to use those skills enough to see the value in the training?
I think that they don't, like, it's very hard, for people to recognize when they are deficient. Because like the people that you see training that are really good, like they probably were never deficient in that skill. Yeah. Like they were naturally good at it, right? I have to like very like diligently make myself train defensive tactics because like that is not something I naturally excel at. Yeah. I have to be very like diligent about it. Exercise, like that's a pretty like normal habit for me. So like that comes naturally to me. I shoot well. I enjoy shooting, so I do shoot a lot. And so that skill, like, I'm good. The one that I have to push myself the most to like get up and actually train is the one that I am the worst at, and that's defensive tactics.
I think it's hard for anyone to constantly do the thing you're not getting a positive response from.
Right.
Right. That's the thing you're not good at. So it doesn't feel good to do it. I have this conversation with my kid all the time. It's like, we need to practice, man. Like, just like we throw the ball, just like we run, just like all the little things, like your ABCs, like you got good at it. And then you wanted to go show everybody that you knew your ABCs. But they weren't in the bathtub while we were training for months, teaching ABCs. Them to you, right? And I think that adults are the same way. Yep. Like if you're good at something, it's fun to do it because you're positive or the feedback is positive. Right. But when you suck at it, you avoid it.
Right.
And that's the absolute wrong answer.
And there's also this like intimidation factor of where like, you're like, I don't want to walk into a room with like the people that rely on me to like have their back out there and for them to think that like, oh God, like.
To see that I suck at it.
To see that I suck at something. Yeah. But in reality, like it actually is the opposite.
It is.
Like,
I want to see you in there because we all know you suck at it.
Yeah.
Everyone knows. It's not a secret.
And I feel safer knowing that you suck at it.
Yeah.
Because then I'm not running around thinking you have an unrealistic understanding of your capabilities.
Absolutely.
But I do think that's just like a mental exercise that's difficult.
Sure. It's human.
It is.
Everybody's that way. Are you married?
No.
No? You have a boyfriend?
No.
No? Okay.
No.
Okay. I just wanted to see how you managed taking off those hats. Because, like, for me, when I was in the Marine Corps, I was on a deployment. 7 months, I was in that zone. And then I come home and I'm in a different zone.
Yeah.
You have to take that off and on daily.
Yeah.
How do you manage that?
So I have like a very, I love routine. And I have a very it's visual cues, basically. Like I don't go past a certain part of my house in uniform.
Really?
Like I put my uniform on in, like basically by the garage door. Like I put the uniform on there. Like all my gear like remains like ready there. Like my charging stations, everything is all there. And it's also kind of like just a hygiene thing.
Yeah,
too.
It's also
like I don't want to like bring through my house like if I've like because a lot of the places I go in are not clean or there's like blood or whatever. Yeah. Like so I take all of that, I put it on and I take it off before I go past a certain point of my house. And like
that's good. Yeah. It sort of compartmentalizes.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I like that.
It works.
Yeah. That's.
Mhm.
I had a real hard time with it, I feel, and some of it was just, I don't know, not having a clear and defined transition or a moment of, hey, these are the skills and these are the perspectives you got to put down now, and then come back and step into civilian life, particularly getting out of the military. How do you feel, or what's your strategy for retirement? How are you going to put all of this down and then progress with your life? Because it will end.
Yeah. And that's something that, I'm watching a lot of officers struggle with. And some of them stay too long because they have nothing else.
Yeah.
That is very much a work in progress. For me, I don't have an answer for that right now.
I think watching is exactly the thing to do. Like where that person, they probably should have left. Maybe that was the point for them. I need to be aware of the point for me.
Yeah.
And seeing who's successful and who's not.
Yeah. I mean, I hope that I have a relationship that, kind of helps have something else to focus on. I don't have kids. I'm never going to have kids, but my niece and nephews, I am hoping that they can be kind of something that I focus on more, at some point.
Why don't you want kids?
I've never wanted kids. Yeah. That is just not for me. That's a lot of work.
I can understand. It is a lot of work. It is a lot of work.
I mean, I told my mom, I think I was 5 or 6 years old, and I was like,
not for
hey,
me.
I'm never having kids. And she's like, you know what? There's no reason for somebody that doesn't want kids to have kids. Whatever.
That's exactly true. If you don't want them, definitely don't have them.
And I was fortunate. I didn't have any type of parental pressure. Nobody is trying to have a biological clock ticking on me. And I mean, I've just never felt it. I'm 38.
Yeah.
So, and never once have I been oh man, I have a change in perspective now. And I'm man, especially my sister, I'm your life looks insane. And
her life looks insane.
Your kids are wild. I love them dearly. But I'm going to go to my room now and close the door. Please tell them not to come in there.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. I remember my wife and I didn't have kids until late in life. We were I was 33, I think. And so all of my friends had kids, 20s, some of them in high school, and I felt the same way. Just, it's fun to come play, but I really like going back to my quiet house.
Yeah.
And walking my dog that,
right.
If he mouths off, I just stick him in the kennel.
Right. Yeah.
They frown when you put your kids in a kennel.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But I have a lot of freedom, you know, and I just kind of do what I want when I want. And
that's cool. What's the long-term goal? Do you want to be a detective? Do you want to get into the political side of things? You're a lawyer as well. Maybe be the DA one day and fix this place.
Oh God, absolutely not. Pie in the sky. If I could chart my territory, I'd like to be the chief of police.
Okay.
But kind of the most immediate goal is robbery detective and then homicide detective probably.
Are there a lot of homicides in Austin?
More homicides now than there have ever been historically.
I heard that it went up 18% or something in the last year or two.
Yeah. So, typically we had, maybe 15 to 20 homicides a year. That was kind of average. I think we passed 80 last year.
80?
And the year before. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, nationally, violent crime increased during COVID, after COVID.
I could see that.
Yeah. I mean, family, when you're cooped up with your family, family violence kind of went through the roof. People losing their jobs, not having, access to the same types of outlets that you would have previously. There's a lot of societal factors, right?
Yeah.
People's mental health declining, all these things are contributing, but we're still seeing that increase. This Austin still feels like a small town, but we're a big city with big city problems. Like I said, we're 10th largest city in the country. We're the capital of Texas. We're a big city with big city problems, but we do not have a city council that really recognizes that. violence prevention, like, there's this like, violence interrupters type program. Like, I fully support doing anything and everything we can to prevent violence. But again, the reality is like we have like juveniles with access to guns. Like we've got, because we do not in this county prioritize or really prosecute like drug crimes unless they are like a high level, like, distribution type individual.
So they've just stopped prosecuting for any drug? Is it? I know weed's kind of become a gray area just nationally. Nobody gives a shit about weed.
Nobody cares
anymore.
about weed. The thing is like a lot of homicides happen on buying weed.
Really?
Yeah.
Buying weed.
Yeah.
Like you can go to any vape shop and get all these different flavors of.
Yeah.
They've divided THC into a million different and they all do the same shit. And they're killing each other over weed.
Yeah, but and not just weed, right? But like, dope rips. Like, I'm gonna set up a buy. I'm gonna, on social media, I'm gonna use Snapchat or whatever they use. Like, I'm gonna go buy drugs from this person. And then when they get there, they're like, actually, no, I'm gonna take the drugs and I'm just gonna shoot this person.
Wow.
Yeah. And I don't know.
Bad for business.
Yeah. Yeah, but again, we are not talking about criminal masterminds, right? Like these are like very like instant gratification situations.
No ability to see the future.
So yeah, I mean we have drugs just kind of rampantly running through the city. I would love to believe that, substance abuse treatment was a solution, but oftentimes it's not.
What is the city council doing to mitigate violence? As I've heard that they were sending out more like a family counselor or like a social worker instead of a police officer for certain category of crime. Is that what's happening?
So not necessarily for crime. So the idea after like the 2020 riots and this kind of like defunding movement was that the police are doing jobs that they're not suited for. And I completely agree with that.
Okay.
Like, I am not a social worker.
Yeah.
Like, I happen to have this other degree that, and I have age, right? Like, I have life experience that allows me to talk to people and, like, de-escalate situations just because I have, like, human experience. But at the end of the day, like, I am not a doctor. I am not a social worker. I am not a counselor. I am not a therapist. I'm not a substance abuse expert. I am none of those things. I am a cop. And like, I became a cop to put bad guys in jail. Like, at the end of the day, like, that is the purpose of being a cop. That's why I became a cop. That's why I want to be a cop. When the state law makes it where police officers are the only ones with the power to commit somebody without a court order, you kind of pigeonhole us into this responsibility in the mental health care cycle that we really aren't suited for.
Yeah.
Like, would I prefer that a social worker go and talk to the person in the middle of a mental health crisis? 100%. Like, I would love to never go to a mental health call again in my life. But the problem is that oftentimes somebody in a mental health crisis is unpredictable, not necessarily violent towards somebody else, but they may be throwing things, they may be yelling, they may be doing something that a social worker is not equipped to handle. Like, they may not feel safe being there helping this person, which is also reasonable. So in those instances where like a social worker may try to make contact with somebody in the community, oftentimes, just like fire and EMS, they're going to stage and wait for us to get there.
Yeah.
So like the logistics of actually implementing that type of response from other providers from a first responder perspective, like, is lost in translation to people that aren't out there doing it.
I see. It's a hard job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a great job, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
no regrets.
You sound like the right kind of person to be doing it.
Oh, well, thank you.
I asked you yesterday if you had any kind of book recommendation, and you said you like to read.
Yeah, I love to read. So at APD, we have there's this group of us that we have this kind of like informal book club.
Okay.
Just to brag about APD officers here for a second. We have a lot of just extremely smart people. Like we have a lot of people that, just are like eager to learn, want to be better, like love the job and want to just provide like the highest level of service to this community, despite like what our reputation may be. And so like this is a pretty large group of officers of all different ranks that participate in this kind of informal book club. And so the most recent thing we read was The Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter. And I'm not saying it's my favorite book I've ever read, but the premise is that as we've kind of evolved as a species, with technological innovations, with urbanization, like we've taken away a lot of the kind of like fundamental like things that humans used to do, like, have to seek out food, have to like engage in community, for kind of your basic needs. And because of that, like we are like less healthy. We are, our mental health is declining. We are experiencing obesity at some of the highest rates. We are like our environment is tasked. Like we've taken away a lot of these things that used to keep us healthy in this, basically in like pursuit of comfort and convenience.
I read that when it was Ted Kaczynski's manifesto.
Right.
Have you ever read it? It's almost the same, like he talks the same way, like all of the things that we used to do to sustain life kept us busy.
Right.
And they were our challenge and our achievement in our day-to-day life. And we've simplified every one of those so much that we've now become consumed with all of these surrogate activities and these achievements is why people attach themselves to football teams. And they don't say they won, they say we won.
Right.
Right. Well, you ain't never played for the Cowboys.
Yeah.
And they don't win anyway.
Right.
So what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah, they really don't. God, they're awful.
But like that's what people do. And because we've become so comfortable. And I think this is a cliche thing now, but the hard men make good times make hard times, that whole cycle of life. And we're suffering now for a lot of the convenience that we've created.
For sure.
That's a good book. I'll have to put that one on the list.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anything else you'd like to share?
I think that's it.
I appreciate you coming in. This was a really awesome conversation. I learned a whole bunch. This was great. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
It was a real pleasure
Appreciate
to meet
it.
you.
Yeah, you too.